I'm Andy Crouch, inviting you to download and listen to the new Beer Edge podcast, a source for news, information, and insight regarding the brewing industry and the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. The show, co-hosted by John Hall and I, talks with key players on the front lines of the beer business to give you insights and advice on how to navigate these uncharted waters. The Beer Edge podcast is available on all major platforms, or you can visit us at beeredge.com/podcasts. Thanks for your support.
Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer. It's the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Hall, and I'm going to tell you about today's guest, Chase Healy of American Solera, in just a moment. But first, I'd like to invite you to check out beeredge.com. There, you can find articles, links to individual shows of this podcast, as well as the Beer Edge podcast, and you can subscribe to our industry newsletter. And please, also don't forget our social media channels at The Beer Edge. And please don't forget also to subscribe to this show and to leave a review. It does help others find out what we're doing here. Okay, enough of the business. Now it's on to the fun. A few years ago, when I worked at All About Beer magazine, I was able to visit Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I spent a pretty memorable evening at American Solera, the brewery founded by Chase Healy. His original intent was to create beers in wood using the Solera method. His then location was relatively new, but the brewer who cut his teeth and made a name for himself at Prairie Artisan Ales did not disappoint with what was being poured from bottles. The beers were lively and complex and showcased the deliberateness of time, wood, and sometimes fruit. The business has changed a lot since then. In fact, the whole industry has changed, and he's since moved into a new location, and rather than just focusing on one style or method, he's branched out into new beery avenues. We spoke towards the end of June, and it was an early morning call, and we were both on cups of coffee. And Chase spoke to me from the brewery in Tulsa, where his team was just getting going. So I started off by asking him what was being brewed. Here's our conversation.
We are making a double batch of hard seltzer, some sugar water. I guess it's all sugar water, but this is, as plain as it gets, I guess.
When you founded American Solera going on, 4 years now?
Yeah, we started back in 2016. That August, the laws changed in our state, allowing direct-to-consumer sales. So we opened with the strategy of a majority of our sales being direct and from our tap room.
I mean, at that point, though, the wave of White Claw hadn't even begun to crest yet, as far as I know.
I don't even think it was it wasn't even, maybe, did it exist? I don't even know.
Well, I mean, there were FMBs that were out there.
Existed.
Yeah. What was your attitude towards those 4 years ago, and how did you come to the...
How do we go from that to 4 years ago? American Solera was, in a little warehouse along the river in West Tulsa with like 16 fooders in it. And I don't think I'd brewed an IPA in years, to now, sitting in a new facility where we're making 30 barrels of seltzer and have probably more IPA on tap than other styles. And it's just been a journey, I guess. But a lot of that does come from the direct to consumer experience and working in a tap room and, just creating flavors and playing with ideas, because they're not so permanent. So we can try things and play, and there's like not a lot of downside to it, because like we have a hit or we don't, and then we go to the next idea, or we dig deeper. So our brewery's like main purpose is to play with flavors, and so going from being a brewer that was very traditional and very strict in how we created our flavors to one that really don't feel too limited anymore has been a lot of fun, more than anything. But to me, like even the seltzer route and the way we're making it, it's just another paintbrush in the sheath of tools that we can use here.
Well, when you say the way that you're making it, are you deviating from, just the standard boiling sugar water, clean yeast, adding some
You
fruit?
know,
Like, what's the?
yeah, we're not going too crazy, but I mean, we're not necessarily worried about it being like an uncolored, plain, we're not doing any kind of, filtration, or we're worried about trying to make any like amount of sugar claims or anything like that. We're just trying to make something that tastes good to us, and we're more worried about the way it tastes than if it's like low in calories or anything like that.
I mean, that's part of the original allure of the hard seltzers. I think for a lot of folks is the low calorie, no carb lifestyle. But if you're not necessarily focusing on that, have you found? Obviously, you're making it and you're making a double batch of it, so you've found a receptive audience. But has it been uniformly receptive by people who might otherwise drink the White Claws or the Trulies or whatever else is out there?
I mean, we've just really dipped our toes into it. It took us kind of we screwed up a couple times trying to make it and not being happy with the results, and then looking at what Evil Twin's done with his Evil Water, and chatting with them about kind of like their thoughts on it, and then finally honing it in. You know it's honestly like our bestseller, so it's pretty funny kind of deal. So we've only put out one so far, and now this double batch will turn into three more brands, and it's really just about playing. So this first one was a collaboration with Evil Water out of Brooklyn, New York, or
Mm-hmm.
Queens, or whatever, and it was lemon hibiscus with ginger sea salt. And so we don't necessarily want to make black cherry or strawberry, like
Kiwi
we want to
lime
play with
and yeah.
we want to play with the flavors. And like, so this next run, we'll do like a tangerine raspberry, which is pretty safe. But then we're gonna play with LaCroix put out like a cola, and we all loved it. Now you can't buy it anymore, but so we're playing with creating like a cola version of hard seltzer, or like using toasted coconut and kind of seeing what it does. So I don't think we're doing anything too crazy or out there, but we want to play with it. And again, it's just making something that's fun to drink. And we make a lot of kind of more aggressive beers that aren't necessarily for every beer drinker. So creating something that allows everyone to have an experience with things we're making in our tap room is a big piece for us, because more than anything, and this comes from being years out in an isolated spot in
Mm-hmm.
a warehouse district in a utility, really not friendly space, to now
I
being in a
visited. Yeah. No.
community.
Yeah.
Like, we want to be the community spot that people love to come to, and it's very comfortable, and there's something for everyone here. And so we can make the 3-year blended spontaneous things, but we can go from one side to the other. And I think giving ourselves permission to do that has been huge. And it's just fun, and we can be really strict, and we can be as out there as anyone wants, and it creates a space that everyone can enjoy.
So you say the word permission and giving yourself permission to do that. When you first opened this, though, the plan was to really just sort of focus on blending beer over multiple years, like the traditional Solera method, right? I mean,
Right.
you weren't
And we
thinking about
still
IPAs, you weren't thinking about lagers.
No, but I mean, at the time, even when I was starting to fill all my fooders and work on those projects, um, we weren't allowed to self-distribute or have a tap room or anything. So, a year before those laws happened, and it happened quickly in our
Mm-hmm.
state, we went from having some of the strictest liquor laws in the country to some of the most relaxed. And
Yeah, I
I
remember
think
visiting right after
everyone
those were
wanted
lifted. Yeah.
yeah, everyone wanted that to happen, but at the time I couldn't plan for it. So all of a sudden, you're able to have a tap room, and you need beers that can come out a little quicker than a year, 8 months. Like, we need stuff that's ready in 3 weeks. Um, and so again, it's like that expert. Can we do these styles and explore creating like really excellent and well, like, created bold flavors? and do the same thing, say, that we're trying to do when we're trying to extract flavor from, fruit in a mixed fermentation beer? Can we create the same flavor extraction and experience using, hops in a hoppy beer? And I mean, I think the same mentality is still going on, and what we're trying to achieve. It's just using it's just on a different scale and scope, but the same goals are still there, and creating flavor.
So the original space was sort of conducive to your early vision for the brewery, and now, I guess, just within the last couple of months, less than a year, you've moved into a new, much larger space in what you all are calling the brewery district.
Yeah,
Was that
totally.
part of the evolution of the beers as well? Of, if you're going to go to a place that is not quite as remote or desolate. I remember visiting your original location, parking on the far end of the parking lot, and wondering, if I was going to be, snatched up by the shadows walking from my car to to your tap room.
Come on, it's just like a sandblaster on one side and a junkyard on the other. So
Yeah,
it's
what
just,
could possibly go wrong? Yeah, that's usually where all the family-friendly movies are set, not the horror films. Yeah, is the
Yeah.
sandblasters and the junkyards. Yeah. But did that, so one, I guess, what brought you to the move? And then also, it's so interesting to me when breweries, decide to sort of cluster together, because sometimes there's strengths in numbers, but then there's also worries of increased competition as well.
Sure.
So I'm sort of curious about how you sort of weighed the risks, rewards.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest piece of that is Tulsa is just a town that's really kind of on the is a growing and kind of just on the verge of really becoming a special place. And so for here, unlike somewhere like maybe in Austin, we've got to be more centralized and make it easy for people. And so, there was one point where I owned, 17 acres of an old golf course that I was going to turn into a farm like 30 minutes outside of town. And I own that, and I'm glad I don't anymore, kind of thing. So, one second, the brewers, everyone in the brewery just cranked Yacht Rock here, and I can't.
Absolutely.
Let me turn it down for you for 1 second. I
All
gotta
right.
fix this. Lose my train of thought here.
Yeah,
One
Yacht Rock
second.
can be very, very distracting.
Sorry about that.
All good.
So, let me get back to sorry. Can you ask the question again?
Well, no, just sort of the risk versus rewards of going into where other breweries are.
Yeah. So, yeah, like I was saying, Tulsa's a kind of up and coming city. So creating momentum for what we're doing and creating a destination where someone on a Saturday can park a car and have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different experiences in 6 different spaces. That's just fun.
Yeah.
So we all kind of have our own vibe and our own kind of identity in the things we're making. The Marshall, who's to the east of us, does really great lagers and some more traditional beers, and Cabin Boys on the other side of our patio, does some different Belgian styles, and then there's a cidery and a distillery, and then one more brewery on the other side of us, a couple blocks away, and they're making some kind of more experimental beer. And so everyone kind of has something to offer. Everyone's aesthetic is different, and so it works really well here. And the fact of the matter is like our old space just was not convenient for anyone. So just being in town, hell, I live just less than 3 miles away from here. So being near people is helpful, but at least not being so isolated that it just keeps people away was just a win for us for sure. But it hasn't felt, at least from our perspective, as increased competition. In fact, the brewery, we just released a collaboration with the brewery that's on the other side of there's like a rail spur between us that's now just our patio. We did a collaboration where we brewed wort in our brew house, and we had enough hose to connect to the fermenters in their brewery,
And
and we
what's
made wort for each other and sent it, from one brewery to the other, just pumped it right out of the brew house.
and what's the brewery?
That's Cabin Boys
Yeah.
Brewery.
So and
So we made
it's
a
like
session
100. It's like
IPA.
100 feet. That's
That's what the
the
beer's called, yeah, about
yeah.
100 feet. So that gives you an idea of kind of the friendships and the morale around here. Is we all want everyone to succeed, and so much that they're next door and we'll still make beer with them. So it's pretty fun to be down here.
Who came up with the idea to just run hoses between the breweries?
Man, I think it was mine quite a bit ago, and then we've just been really in getting this place kind of open mode and getting situated, and so there was never really a great time to do it. And then finally, with the virus and kind of things slowing down a little bit, it was presented an opportunity for us to do something that showed kind of us being friends, and we just they one day said we had an open tank, and we're like, well, let's do that one idea, and then we just kind of went for it. So it
And what'd you make?
it was a session IPA. We just wanted something easy drinking, something people can come that are comfortable, come back and hang out and have one, and on our patio or theirs, and it was just a pretty fun project all around.
So you mentioned the slowdown. COVID-19 has obviously impacted pretty much every American at this point, and businesses of all sizes. How've the last couple of months been for you?
Oklahoma has, they've maybe been quick to get reopened, for better or worse, and it's been, I think, about a month now. We've started about a month ago. We started letting people have beer in separate tables on our patio, to now about a week and 2 weeks ago starting to let people be spaced out inside. I mean, we've got a space with 50-foot high ceilings, very open air, and starting to allow people to come in, but still only consume like canned products.
Mm-hmm.
And now in the last week, we have started serving draft in glassware again. And so we've slowly been phasing in, but it was interesting for a couple months where we had to pivot from being, each batch like 30%, 40% draft, 60% package to 100% package. And luckily there were lots of places that wanted that packaged beer because that's what people were buying. So
Right.
The shift was good, and we were able to keep brewing and keep stuff going. But obviously when we can make IPAs and other fresh beers and sell them for, $6 to $8 a glass in our brewery, I mean, that's what our business is based around. So
Right.
we got by, but we certainly, did that at best, was kind of get by. And now it's starting to feel better for sure.
So I want to talk about wood because it's one of those X factor ingredients that your brewery has really become known for, and obviously was built around with the original concept. For those who don't know what a Solera is, can you give us just the quick tutorial?
Sure. A Solera system, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be on an oak, but it's the idea that you're starting with an original vessel of, be it beer, spirits, vinegar, any kind of ageable product, and we're only taking out a half or third of the amount at a time, and then adding fresh product back in. And so the thought is, and because of our move, it kind of interrupted it. Elements of those original batches from 5 years ago still have an impact on the products we're making today. And unfortunately, we did have to do a bit of a reset so we could moving big oak vessels full of liquid. This isn't possible. So we had a little bit of a reset, and honestly shaved down the amount of tanks we have to make the move make sense. And now I'm kind of feeling like I need to start rebuilding that. Cool thing I noticed, Foeder Crafters, who we use, is
Mm-hmm.
offering a really great deal for brewers to get into foeders this year, as far as making it really financially easy to do. But we had to kind of restart. But so that's a big process for us in the original batches, was brewing what was like a mixed culture type farmhouse beer and pulling amounts to make dry hop things or fruited things. And it's still something we do, but it's definitely on a smaller scale now that all these other projects like really take up a lot of our capacity and time.
Do you guys have a house culture? Like something that you think uniquely represents you and your brewery when it comes to your mixed culture beers?
Yeah, we do. I mean, it's not something that we like. It's like really crazy out there or anything, but it's a mix of different pitches that we like from different labs. I think about 3 different labs, honestly, from the East Coast to the West Coast. So we're sourcing stuff from a few different labs, and they just kind of have landed all together. And we just keep, right now I know in our sour cellar in the middle fermenter is the freshest batch of mixed culture beer. So we'll pull it off of that tank and use it to ferment the next. And honestly, I think we've only rebuilt that one time in the last 5 years. So it's been chilling with us for a minute. We keep it going. So that piece has carried over from the old facility. But yeah, I mean, we've got a pitch that has a moderate acidity and nice apricot stone fruit type character to it, is definitely a piece of that. But the other big thing is that we do spontaneous batches as well, and that's yeast from this part of town kind of thing. So and we'll do a lot of times, after emptying a spontaneous barrel, we'll put some of our foeder base back in the barrels and create different things with that, and that definitely helps create even more identity and flavor profile that's more specific to us.
You were doing spontaneous over at the old location too.
Yeah, so we've only done a few batches here. We actually, in this location, people look through like our social media or something, we built like a really excellent like cool ship room in this new building that has movers up in the top that can open up, and then windows lower that can open as well, so we can create really good convection in there. But it's lined with oak staves from foeders. The whole room is, and then we've got a 30-barrel cool ship inside. So we're able to use it a few times this season, and it's not something we're trying to do any more of than we need. Like it's something we do for the love of it, and so doing a few batches a year is enough to kind of keep the ball rolling on that and keep me excited about it without filling our whole brewery full of spawn barrels, because the other side of that is people really like the stouts we make. So
Yeah.
I've got to have room for that oak too. So it's a balance in here, and we separate it with separate cellars and an enclosed room for the clean beer, and do it, just do it enough. I mean, the big thing for our brewery is we could get to between 2,000 and 3,000 barrels of production. Like, I'm pretty happy with that, and don't necessarily feel a need to make a whole lot of extra beer for the sake of market share or increase sales. Like, we can all make, everyone, we got a small crew here, and we can make a good living from that, and that makes me happy. So we're doing the spawn here as well, and like I said, it's pretty cool little spawn cool ship room that we made, and a focal point in our facility.
I mean, obviously the equipment is different, but have you noticed in the few batches that you've made at the new place, have you noticed any, I don't know, aroma or flavor differences, even just having moved a couple of miles away?
I haven't tasted them. I
don't
don't
even
know. I mean, I don't touch the stuff for at least 6 to 10 months before we're even worried about what it might taste like.
Really?
So it's in the barrels. I hope it tastes good, but honestly, I'm not even totally sure. I guess I could go get a drill and a nail and try some of the stuff. But just as important as the oak in our brewery is the time we let stuff sit. So it's okay. And honestly, doing a few batches at a time, if it's all fucked up, it's like whatever. Like we'll do it again. We'll see. We'll kind of look at our notes and see if there's something that maybe we overlooked in the time, because temperature is a variable in that type of product as well. And
Yeah.
we may
And
get
you guys have temperature swings there as well.
we get an 80-degree weekend in January.
Right.
And those are awesome when they hit, but they're not ideal for making spontaneous beer. So we'll see. It's one of those projects that, like, yeah, the space would be better used if I didn't have it in there and I have more room for other equipment, but it matters to me. So we'll keep doing it, even if it is just a couple blends a year.
As a brewer, I mean, you're obviously doing session IPAs that you can turn around pretty quick, and there's some lagers that you're making that I want to talk about in a minute, but that'll take a couple of weeks to turn around. But I don't know, the importance of time and the importance of patience. I'm curious of your approach as a brewer for that, of not tasting something for 6 or 7 months. Like, are you able to compartmentalize parts of your brewing brain to just put it out of mind, or are these things always just sort of bubbling to the surface of worry, anxiety, curiosity, whatever the word might be?
Sure. No, I mean, the big thing about it, especially, I mean, it's just like we've been so rewarded with patience that it's just feels okay to me. And we're just so damn busy otherwise that it's okay just to kind of forget that stuff's over there. And that was an interesting thing, is so when you're trying to move your brewery across town and you can't necessarily move full vessels, I had to make a couple of spawn blends. Even with some of the younger stuff, I had to just feel okay about dumping some things that I didn't know where they were necessarily going and getting rid of it and effectively starting over. Like, we did successfully bring, I think, about a dozen or 14 full stout barrels over that have been aging for about a year, and have since packaged those out and made really excellent beers. But the way we took care of our spawn and our sour beer that was in barrels and foeders is, and we're just now to packaging them, is we racked it onto fruit, allowed fermentation to occur, and then mid fermentation drove stainless totes over here to try to keep that beer going, but moving is really difficult. So
Yeah.
now I've got just a bunch of fresh beer, and it's like, I know it's just not ready. Like, we kind of had to reset. So brew the spawn batches, forget about them, and worry about packaging all these other fruited projects. And like yesterday, we just bottled like 2-year-old spawn on a mix of Balaton Montmorency cherries. But that's how we did it, is we racked all our spawn barrels onto the fruit, got the fermentation, and drove them in. And the reason we did it that way is we're really trying to avoid O2 pickup and making our beer taste shitty. So
Yeah.
We're pretty happy with the results. And again, that's an interesting part of our sour program too, is that was bottled in clear 750s, the thought being that the hops are quite old that we're using and we shouldn't have issues. And we kind of say we don't really care if we get it some light struck qualities or anything. Like, we want to challenge that idea, and we could be wrong, but it sure looks cool. And then so that's a big piece, like with our sour program and how it's evolved as well, is kind of thinking about the different ways that we package and present it and price it to people. And that's been a big piece of navigating. Is this ready to use? Do we just need to forget about it? What can we do with this to keep people excited about these styles of beer? So
you've kept your price point relatively, I don't know, accessible.
Yeah, and I mean, that's just categorizing the beers we're making. Like, we did that, but we also did lower concentrate cherry mixed culture beer and put it in 12-ounce cans, can conditioned mixed culture cherry beer. And
that sounds like fun.
Yeah, we did, like, it's interesting, because a beer like that we would have packaged in, say, single 500 milliliter bottles or something like to that extent a few years ago and sold for $14 a bottle, we're now packaging off of a wild Goose canning line and selling 4-packs of for the same price. And so it's just one of those things. I think the way the market's moved, if you still want to make these styles of beer in that way, like, you just have to be okay with not being able to put as much, money in your pocket from producing them. Like, it's the only way like people are gonna get to them is if you make them accessible.
You mentioned stouts. Obviously, before American Solera, you were at another brewery that is fairly well known for making stouts that get folks excited. What do you think goes into making a world-class stout? Like, what is, because there's a lot of stouts that are out there these days. A lot of them are heavily adjuncted, and that can be fun and fine. But when we're talking about just base stouts, what do you look
Sure.
for?
That's a really interesting question, and one that, like, we kind of got into on accident, honestly, because, like, we had like the recipes and things that we were doing at Prairie that are and still make like really excellent beers, and I know since then they've developed some different stout recipes too.
Mm-hmm.
But like the first one where it like was a really big tipping point for us, and I guess it's what they would call a whale, is the Sons of Darkness beer that we did with 18th Street here about 3 or so years ago. And the whole thought on that beer is we'd just gotten a new brew house, and Drew was going to come into town, and we were like, let's just throw everything we can at this brew house and see where its breaking point is as far as amount of malt, all the things we can do. I think
You're treating it like a rental car. Yeah.
We filled her as full as we could with malt, and then boiled as long as we could. I think we finally got the kettle full after a couple mashes, or maybe we just did one and just did a smaller batch. But we finally got the kettle full and started the boil, and we went and had like a steak dinner and like left for a few hours, and then came back, and as we're coming back, the thing's boiling over, and it was just like kind of like, oh shit. And we get it under control, and then it was like we pitched and let it go, and then tasting it later, we were like, this is pretty sweet. I mean, it seems like we're not going to get any more out of it, but what do we do? And so we rack it to barrels, and I don't know if it was going to mold or be weird or anything, because like I just never dealt with beer that had that much residual sweetness and body and thickness to it. And we put it into barrels and said, well, it's a small project. We'll just, whatever happens. And the result is that beer. And yeah, it's unadjuncted, but incredibly thick and sweet, boozy result. So, being the big thing for me, and the definition, I think, of world class stout has changed over the years, because
Mm-hmm.
like North Coast makes a version of Imperial Stout that is world class. Is it different than what we're making? 100%. So obviously tastes are changing and what people are excited about, but it doesn't make, I don't think, those styles any less important. But it's just kind of this crazy thing now, what people are doing with that style. And it's fun to play with, for sure. So, but for us, it's been feeling okay, because like I used to make stouts like that. I mean, I was brewing Imperial Stouts, a decade ago, and aging them in whiskey barrels, and the things we did then and the things we're doing now are not the same. And as a brewer that's been brewing for the better part of a decade, it made me uncomfortable to do things the way that we do. I had to kind of allow myself to do things that felt like maybe wasn't right as a traditional brewer. Yeah, I mean, I think you do it a couple times, as far as taking what you've learned and being okay with it. You got to get to the end results. So for me, that was a journey that took, a year and a half of getting to finished beer and being blown away by the results, and then feeling comfortable and okay with the fact that we're brewing these beers and pitching fresh packages of yeast, and not making big like yeast starters like we used to, and not maybe oxygenating the beer for, the next day, and like doing all these tricks, feeding the sugar into the beer later, like doing all these tricks to create continued attenuation where these beers are thick because they're sweet, so, but you have to balance that too, or it can be a mess. So, allowing ourselves to be okay with feeling like it doesn't feel right, like took a little bit, but I'd say we're there
As
now
you're,
for sure.
yeah. So on the wood front, you were mentioning photographs earlier, and one of the things these days is brewers have choice, so you can pick the type of wood that you like, you can pick the level of toast that you like. What have you found speaks to you, or are you still sort of bouncing all over the place and trying to
We're
dial
not
that
too
in?
crazy. I mean, the big piece about it now is we have just our light toasted fooders that are really neutral, and then we also now have a couple that have cooling fins in them. Still, we stick with the light toast on those, because the big thing is we're trying to make that stock beer. So a piece we're getting back to is using that stock beer and then taking it and doing a project, say in 59-gallon Chardonnay barrels, Sauvignon Blanc, red wine barrels that are specific to variety. So using that as just a stock and then moving to smaller barrels that have character from what was previously in them or the type of wood it is really the move we're doing. But the interesting thing is like it's in our sour cellar, but we do our best to keep it separate. Is the two with cooling fins in them we're actually doing lagers in and trying to just keep them as clean as we can and packaging on that side into 16-ounce cans of lager that we're oak fermenting, lagering, and kind of Solera, not necessarily, but we kind of empty it. We have two of them, so 1 month we're brewing into one, and then the next month we're brewing into the next, and each month we're packaging out of one of the tanks, but we're not rinsing them or doing anything like that. We're just kind of feeding them new wort and fermenting them cold.
And that's what I was sort of curious about. Have you noticed an evolution of flavor as you've done that? Because, I mean, so much of what people think of as lager is sort of this uniform, tastes the same every time. But if you are using a foeder, it is going to evolve.
And we may screw it up and then get a little bit of acid character or something to them over time. We're doing our best we can to kind of let them operate separately, but we're not scared of them changing like that. I mean, if we want a clean, easy drinking, ready to go lager, we'll just produce it in the other side.
Yeah.
So we're okay with those wandering, and a thing I think we're playing with right now is
Wandering is a good word.
Temperatures on fermentation and in ways that allow maybe the oak to play a role in that.
Like what temperatures are you talking about?
I mean, it's nothing crazy, but if we were fermenting in low, 50 degrees, maybe we'll do one at 56. Like,
so creeping up rather than down.
Creeping up with the idea that creating a little bit warmer beer potentially is going to interact with the oak a little bit differently, and obviously it's going to be slightly more estery, but it's like a foeder lager, so we're okay with that. And maybe that's not necessarily what others are trying to achieve doing this type of process, because it's an old idea, but it's a new concept for brewers like ourselves. So we just want to play with it. Like, there's just nothing stopping us from doing that. I think the next round they want to condition in the cans versus condition, carbonate in the tank, and just playing with it. Where our production is small enough and our consumers understand us well enough that creating variables and playing with it and evolving it, and maybe we'll get it to like where like this is so perfect I never want it to taste different, but it's fun to play with. So I think we'll keep tweaking it as we go.
Well, now you're making me thirsty for a lager. We're recording this early on a Wednesday morning, and I think we're both having coffee, but now I want to now I need a foeder aged lager. I've been asking folks recently, because our world has been upended so much, what are you looking forward to getting back to? What have you been missing over the last couple of months of restrictions and lockdowns? And doesn't have to be beer,
Maybe.
but yeah.
No, I like enjoying a beer out, like going out to dinner with my wife.
I
It's
remember
we got
restaurants. Yeah.
we got two little boys, and we love them to death. But man, we're spending a lot of time with them,
Yeah.
for sure, because they're not in school, and that's hard. Like, and so actually tonight will be the second time we'll have a little bit of childcare, and we'll go to at least a patio somewhere to get a little bit of that. So, and just being able to go out, man. I think a lot of people probably feel that way for sure. It's been a long time. So, and getting to be able to get out and show support to those places that have struggled as a result of this is a big deal. We want to be able to do that. So yeah, we'll one-on-one time, and we'll dining out will be a lot of fun.
Well, enjoy it. Chase, thanks so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a blast anytime. Happy to ramble on about one thing or another. We've always got something interesting going on over here.
That's Chase Healy of American Solera. Proof that even the best intentions of honing in on one thing in beer these days is difficult. Give the people what they want, but stay true to yourself as well, is something that's guiding a lot of breweries well these days. I've started a map of all of these beer road trip routes that I want to take after COVID-19 restrictions are lifted, and now Tulsa is back on the list, and perhaps I'll see you there. We're in July now, and like so many of you, I was hopeful that we'd be back out in the world, but alas, as the governor in my state has pointed out, there's quite a few knuckleheads spoiling it for all of us, so I'll be doing phone shows for the next, however long it takes. I already have some good ones planned out, but I'll be booking more soon. So who do you suggest to get a turn behind the mic? Send me a note. It's John Hall, JOHNHOLL @beeredge.com, or on Twitter @John_Hall. And be sure to check out beeredge.com for articles and more, and please subscribe to our newsletter. Nate Schweber did the music, Jeff Quinn designed the logo, Andy Crouch doesn't always return my calls, but he does do the Beer Edge podcast, and you should subscribe and listen to that. His latest episode has Natalie Chilurzo from Russian River talking about how the brewery has gone back into startup mode, and it's a listen that you'll definitely find interesting. New episodes of this show come out every Wednesday, and that's when I'll be back again to drink beer and to think beer, and I hope you'll tune in.